Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Face Your Ears podcast. My name is Rich Bozick. I'm joined once again with Justin Hoshella. By Justin Hoshella?
One day we'll figure that out.
How's it going?
I don't know what the exact wording is for that, but yeah, I'm great. Hello, Rich. Hello, listeners. Speaking of listeners, I have an exciting fact to share.
Oh, do tell.
We are very close to having a comma in the number of downloads for this podcast. So we're very close to having 1,000 downloads. And we just wanted to say thank you to all of you for contributing to that. It's a really exciting milestone.
Yes, that's exciting news, Justin. What do we have in store for today?
Well, today we are talking about a topic that I love. Effects. So while there are a seemingly infinite array of effects, today we'll be focusing on 3 key effects in production. And those are reverb, chorus, and delay.
Let's start with my personal favorite, reverb. What is reverb?
Well, we're all familiar with reverb, believe it or not. So if you've ever been in a bathroom with a tiled floor, perhaps...
Whoa, hold on. Where are you going with this?
I literally started at the toilet in this episode. But reverb is often heard in like a space like a bathroom that has a lot of hard surfaces where the sound bounces around. So if you're in like a large church or a warehouse or any kind of large space with hard surfaces, you'll notice the sound tends to bounce around. And so it creates a diffuse sound, a large sound. Reverb provides us a sense of space. So when you're recording in a studio and you're recording a vocal, let's say, it will sound completely devoid of space. And so introducing reverb gives it that sense of space. How would you describe it?
I think reverb, when I'm adding it, when I'm recording, I do it to make the sound have a sense of space.
Yes, that's the word.
I think what would be a good thing is to show our listeners an example of reverb. So I have taken a track that maybe some people are familiar with and have extracted a singular instrument from this track. And I'm going to play you the before. Hit it. So that might sound familiar to those who listen to this podcast. And then the after. Yeah, that sounded like it was in a bathroom.
Sounds like you're singing in the shower a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah.
So as you can see or hear, there is a sense of space to the sound. Can you give us a taste of a different space with that reverb? Give us a different reverb.
All right. Here's what you might sound like in a concert hall.
Excellent. So can you talk to us a little more about some of the things when we're dealing with reverb? There are some buttons and knobs and whatnot. What can we adjust? What are we looking at here?
Well, first off, today we're using Logic Pro, and Logic has a lot of really great reverb plugins. And so that's the first thing to talk about, is that this is a plugin. So we insert this onto our channel here with Rich's vocal. And I'm using a stock reverb plugin from Logic Pro called Chroma Verb. And inside of this, one of the first things we have, and we've already demonstrated it, is a button at the top of our plugin window that allows us to choose different spaces. So for instance, we started off with a room type space, so it sounded like Rich was in a room. I then switched to concert hall for that second demonstration, and there's various other virtual spaces that we can select to color the sound differently to make it sound like the audio is in a different space.
There are also, I noticed, synthesized or synthetic reverbs as well that give a kind of reverb that really wouldn't be possible in the real world. You have some of those options as well.
Absolutely. So you can get very creative. So whether you want to be more traditional and make it sound like, I don't know, a classical guitar in a concert hall, you can do that. But if you want it to sound like it's in some bizarre alien universe or whatever, you can do that too with some of these interesting digital or synthetic kind of spaces that wouldn't be possible in the real world, so to speak.
What are some of the parameters you can tweak? Can you give us just a little bit of a rundown of that?
Sure. So in Reverb, some of the key parameters that we have are decay. So that's how long it takes for that reverb sort of effect to die down or decay. And so we can either shorten or lengthen that decay so that the reverb effect is taking place over time for a certain amount. Distance is another parameter that we have, and so that sort of virtualizes how close we are to the sound source. So it can kind of pull it forward or push it back within the space. And then we've got a couple parameters called dry and wet. And so when we're talking about effects, these are two really key terms to understand. Dry is the signal that it has no effect on it at all. Wet is the signal that has the effect on it. And so when you're talking about effects, it's important to understand these because it's about blending. So you want to, be able to blend the dry signal with the wet signal so that it produces the sound that you're after. This Reverb plugin allows us to do that really easily. So those are a few of the key parameters available to us. And one that we should also touch on is that with this particular plugin, there is an equalizer, which is really important with reverb because sometimes certain frequencies don't sound very good within reverb. And we want to accentuate other frequencies within the signal. So Reverb is unique in that it allows us to lower, say, some of the low frequencies if we wanted to, or boost those low frequencies if we wanted to, or any of the frequencies we could boost or lower to really sculpt the sound within that reverb space.
Another thing to consider also for those of you who may not want to delve into this side of dealing with the plugin, if you don't feel confident getting in there and adjusting these parameters, a lot of times these plugins have presets available that you can explore and pick from options that are preset. Well, that's why they call them presets.
And the nice thing about Reverb that we'll mention in terms of presets is that they're categorized really nicely. So for instance, we've got effects. So again, if you're looking for that kind of weird synthetic kind of space, they have an effects category. We've got halls. So if you want it to sound like it's in some sort of a concert hall, there's all kinds of different presets around that. There's a room category that allows us to dial in different room type sounds. I think these are really well organized to allow you to explore freely. And then if you want to get into some of that tweaking, you can. But I think the presets are a great place to start if you're new to reverb and you're just wanting to explore what some of the results are in using the different presets.
I really like how they have it organized in Logic where you can scroll through the different presets. There's like an arrow on the top of the plugin when you open up the plugin window where you can scroll through them one at a time as you're listening to get a taste of the sound.
Yeah, there's like a little drop-down menu at the top. It says user default, and then we can go into all these different categories and explore. So it's pretty cool.
And that applies to all of the effects we'll be talking about today, and even other things beyond what we're talking about today, such as compression and things like that. You can scroll through presets, which is, I think, huge, because some professional who designed this plugin made some nice presets for us, so we don't have to deal with twiddling all the knobs. We can just get to the music and try stuff out.
It's really built for the full spectrum of musician and user, people that want to tweak and dial in, and people that are brand new and just want to focus on creating the music. So it's open to everyone.
What are we talking about next?
The next effect that we want to talk about is delay.
Hold on. What are we talking about again?
Delay.
Oh. Well, hold on. Wait. What are we talking about?
Delay. Which is delaying us talking about delay. So let's...
Not that kind of delay, of course. We're talking about the plugin delay. Tell us, Justin. Tell us about delay. What is delay?
Delay basically takes a sample, if you will, of the signal and repeats it over predetermined factors of time, I suppose. That's sort of the technical explanation. In layman's terms, it's effectively an echo. So if you imagine yourself standing in the Grand Canyon or something thereof, and you scream out, hello, hello, and you'll hear it come back to you. So it's, it takes a while for that sound to come back and you hear it once again. And so in the studio realm with effects, we can make it so that the delayed sound is repeated over and over again. It's something we hear all the time in popular music, whether it be on vocals or guitars. I mean, you name it. It's a pretty ubiquitous kind of effect.
I think the best way to get people to understand what this is to once again show a before and after. Here we go. And then the after. Cool.
Yeah, we can hear the repeating of the signal. And what's interesting is that reverb and delay are actually technically the same thing. It's just that when we're dealing with reverb, we're dealing with much finer degrees of repetition, and so that our ear picks it up as sort of this diffuse large space. Whereas with delay, we're hearing these sort of discrete repetitions that we can identify. We could even count them. That's a really interesting thing to sort of think about. It's like, oh, okay, like it's actually just degrees of reverb. And so here, the timing is far, far greater. So with this particular example, we're using Logic's stock stereo delay plugin. And what's interesting about this one is, and you'll find this on a lot of delay plugins, is that it allows us to adjust the delay time in either musical increments, like quarter note, eighth note, etc., or in time. So that could be like 500 milliseconds or 250 milliseconds. And so we can either use it in sort of a time-based realm to kind of dial it in as we want it to be, maybe a little bit off from the tempo, or we can lock it in exactly as we want it to the tempo, whole note, half note, etc. So it's pretty cool.
That's awesome. And once again, you can pick through presets with this. Just a side note about that, not all effects work well with all instruments.
Right.
So just be careful with that. It's easy to overdo it too if you go too far with some of the parameters. Also, if you start stacking these effects, that can sometimes lead to an undesirable sound. But play around because, you could always undo stuff. Nothing's permanent with
Yeah.
these plugins. You can dial it back or pick something else.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing to say, is that I think creativity and exploration is encouraged here. I think that's something we're really advocating. And like any sort of medium, any sort of artistic or creative medium, balance is a really important thing to consider. And so we want to make sure that what we're doing balances with the other elements. Right now, we're just using this one vocal by itself, so we can go crazy with it. We can do whatever we want. But if we had other instruments introduced, like guitar, drums, bass, keyboards, etc., they'd all be sort of competing. And so we'd want to dial in the effects so that they're complementing each other and not fighting against each other. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the parameters we have here for this delay, which is kind of unique because it's a stereo delay. So we actually can have different settings for the left channel versus the right channel. So right now, the left channel that we just heard was set at a delay time of a quarter note, while the right delay was set at a delay time of an eighth note. And that really is cool because it produces almost like a ping pong back and forth kind of effect and creates more of a lush kind of sound, more interesting sound for the listener. Another really important element in any delay is feedback. The feedback sets the amount of how much the signal will be fed back into the delay itself. So how many repetitions we get and the strength of the repetitions. And so I'm going to play this one more time, but I'm going to double the feedback. And so we're going to get a totally different feel here. So let's listen to what this sounds like when I increase the feedback. So much longer tail on that feedback. So it's just strengthening the delay signal, allowing it to play out more. So it increases the number of repetitions effectively. That's something that can create a really interesting color. It can also create a lot of competition in your mix. So that's something that you want to consider. Like the other plugin before, like with Reverb, we have the ability to blend our dry and our wet signal. So in this particular plugin, I have a slider for the left channel and the right channel, and that allows us to blend the wet and dry as a percentage. So right now it's set at 30%. So I'm getting 30% of the wet signal mixed with the dry signal. And I can increase that for more of the wet affected signal if I want to. And I can do that on a channel by channel basis. So I can have the left be, say, 50% and the right be 20% or something like that.
This is great. Now, I'm wondering if we can move on to chorus. Now, chorus has always been one of those effects that I know when I'm hearing it and I like it, but I don't know exactly what's going on. Can you clarify?
Chorus effectively is emulating these subtle pitch and timing differences that occur when multiple musicians or vocalists play the same note. So they're varying slightly, like microscopically, in pitch and timing. So if you literally think about a chorus of people, right? So if you had a chorus of 50 people, it's humanly impossible for all of them to sing exactly the same note in the exact same way. I'm talking mathematically. And so there's, at the exact same time. So everybody's got these microscopic little variances, right, in their vocal folds and their sinus cavities and all of these little differences that make the sound slightly different person to person to person. And so when a chorus is singing the same melody, you get this very big, thick sound because of that variance. It's a very beautiful sound. And so a chorus effect emulates that. That's why it's called chorus. It's emulating that idea of having multiple voices with these tiny little variances that create a wider or sort of thicker sound. So that's how I would describe chorus.
Let's show the before and after. Oh,
All right. And here it is with chorus. This one's a little more subtle at its current setting. So one of the parameters of this particular plugin, so I'm using the Logic Pro stock chorus plugin, and like the other plugins we've talked about, we have a mix, and right now it's set at 30%. So we're only getting 30% of the wet signal. So the effect is going to be a little more subtle. So let's hear what it sounds like when I crank it up to, say, 70%. So more than double, and see if we get a different coloration to the sound. So I'm definitely hearing more thickness there. The chorus plugin has a couple other parameters here, and those are called rate and intensity. So when we think about a chorus of people singing, they may have fluctuations in their pitch, right? And so what a chorus effect allows us to do is emulate that fluctuation. Right now, this plugin's rate and intensity for that kind of variation of pitch and timing are set pretty low. So we're not going to hear a very dramatic shift. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase those parameters for rate and intensity just to sort of showcase what that could sound like if we increase that. So here it is again. The rate is how quickly the pitch is being fluctuated, and the intensity is how much of that fluctuation is being introduced into the signal. So that may or may not be what you're going for, but you can hear it's sort of the other extreme, right? The chorus can be used as a creative effect, like we just used it there, but you can dial these parameters back. So I'm going to take our intensity down a little bit more, see what we get. So that's a little more musical, has more thickness, more color to it. Again, it's all about dialing these parameters in to fit our particular project. Just like all of the other plugins we've discussed, there are some great presets to explore and experiment with to see if any of those jump out and fit the sound that you're trying to sculpt. And fortunately, the chorus plugin in Logic Pro is pretty simple. There's only 3 knobs. There's rate, intensity, and mix. And so the mix, again, is the blend between the wet and dry. Intensity is how much of that sort of pitch fluctuation we introduce, and the rate is how quickly the pitch fluctuation is occurring. In most DAWs, like Logic Pro, you can change the order of these plugins, and you can hear the result of that. So we definitely encourage exploration.
Now, Justin, let's do something crazy here. Can we hear all of these effects at the same time?
Oh, yes. And one thing I want to mention before I do that is you can also experiment with the order of the effects. So Right now, we have the reverb as the first part of our signal path. So the sound goes into the reverb, and then the reverb goes into the delay, and then the delay is going to go into the chorus. So in most DAWs, like Logic Pro, you can change the order of these plugins, and you can hear the result of that. So it will definitely change the overall sound. So let's take a listen with all three of our plugins activated. And then the effects. So very cool. You can hear a very dramatic difference between using the effects and not using the effects. And so I think one of the goals of this episode is to showcase what a difference effects can make and how much more vibrant and exciting the sound can become by introducing some of these simple effects like reverb, delay, and chorus.
Excellent. Thank you, Justin. I think this wraps up today's episode. Just to recap everything, we discussed 3 basic effects that are common in a lot of DAWs, oftentimes included as stock plugins. We talked a little bit about reverb, delay, and chorus. And we talked a little bit about some of the parameters you can mess with within the plugin. I think that covers it, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. This was a fun episode to produce. I always love exploring effects, and there are so many more to explore within the realm of our DAWs or in just production in general. So if you, dear listener, enjoyed this episode or want us to talk about particular effects and showcase those, let us know on social media. We're always happy to hear from you there. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Face Your Ears podcast. If you found this episode entertaining and informative, be sure to share and leave a review. Also, check us out on social media and be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. For more information related to our podcast, head on over to www.faceyourears.com. Links can be found in the show description. And remember, whether you're a musician just starting out or a seasoned professional looking to talk shop, it's time to face your ears.